Hey everyone, thank you for joining us on this ChangeNerd episode. Today we are speaking with Darren Madden. He's an experienced change management practitioner and a good friend of mine. And today we're going to discuss how to leverage personas with change management. So Darren, thanks again for your time and having this very valuable conversation. Personas,
Great.
as more companies are moving into the digital space, we're seeing more practitioners using personas. So I'm glad that we're able to have this conversation. But before we get into the content, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
I've had a kind of varied bag of experiences leading up to where I am now. I'm a military veteran, and if you believe it or not, I got my first taste of management consulting and project management in the Marine Corps.
Yeah,
Uh, I was lucky enough to be able to leverage those skills to get into firm consulting with
yeah,
Deloitte. Ever since then, I've worked for firms, done some independent consulting, and now I'm in industry.
we connected. I know that you supported a global technology implementation and you use personas quite a bit. So when you were working with the team and supporting this technology implementation, what was the trigger point to introduce personas?
Well, with this particular implementation, we actually came into it knowing we were going to use personas at the very beginning.
Yeah,
So it was kind of woven into the initial planning all along. But in other situations where that's not necessarily known, I would definitely, uh, I would definitely say you kind of still want to have the same experience. You kind of want to know early on in the planning that you're going to leverage this method because it's a bit of work to put it all together. And you want to make sure you're not just doing work that's not going to pay you back the dividends in the back end.
absolutely. And then, so what would you say is the overall benefit to creating personas?
So, in my experience with personas, I've really seen the benefit being on the stakeholder end. It really helps them conceptualize kind of where their place is along the change journey and uh, through the entirety of the project, right? So, if I could tell them in a logical way that, hey, there's going to be a lot of different ways you can experience this, and you, based on our research, are going to experience this way. I can then bundle everything that person's going to need to successfully move through that change experience
Hmm.
into like whatever that one archetype is. I can say this is all you need. This is basically your change experience packet right here, like X user.
Yeah,
Because you're an X user, this is all you need. And if you need support, we got that too for everyone. And then you could almost like, as we used to say, fire and forget, you know?
yeah,
So
yeah,
purpose does it serve? In my instance, we knew we wanted to be able to package experiences into archetypes for people so they could follow that all the way through.
mm,
We knew that from the start. We built towards that. If you're in another program, you just need to know what you're building towards. Start at the goal line. If if you feel like personas are going to get you there, then work backwards. What do we need to put? What do we need to build into that? There's some specific tactical things you want to do, but the very front, you just got to make sure everyone in that room continues to talk through it and says what is the ultimate goal and understands what do we want to have happen with these personas and archetypes once they are used. Are we just creating them to show them one time? Are we creating them so they're integrated into the experience all the way through for everyone? If
mhm.
it's the former, maybe it's not the right way. If it's the latter, then you might have something. Now, as you're developing it for use, there's a lot of different ways you can get at it, but a really good thing to start with, again, with all things, is looking around to see what's out there first. You don't necessarily have to build your personas from scratch, and we didn't. We started out looking at I think 9 from our partners, and then we went and developed our interview questions and our investigative questions to try to figure out how we could paint a picture of how people worked, how people um, went about their day, things they liked that they had, things they felt like they still needed, how their time was managed. We really deep dove. It was the survey and the interview questions mirrored each other, and we used both of those methods to collect data.
Yeah.
It was sub 50 questions, but more than 40. It was pretty detailed.
Yeah.
Short, multiple choice, all kinds of things. Gather as much info as we could. And we got hundreds and hundreds of responses, and even fewer than we sent out. So we tried to got hundreds, which is fine. And we compiled all the information, and we figured out all the different slices of ways people actually work and what their experiences were. We checked that against against some of the submitted archetypes we already had, and then we created the new ones that didn't exist there that were reflected in the data, and we came out with about 10 total for our experience. And as I said earlier, the use of those from there was, once we knew the types of people we had were all captured, we started crafting our learning, communications, and all those experiences around those different types of team members, and making it so that a person could follow their little archetype through the whole experience and get everything they need. So have access to other things just in case they got curious or in case their role evolved or whatever, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. So essentially you and the project team aligned on kind of the ROI, right? Like the purpose of even doing the work. You set up some stakeholder interviews, conducted a survey, gathered data. How did you go? What was the approach to validate? You have all that information, and you and the team are proposing, hey, here are some draft archetypes, things of that nature. How did you go about validating that?
Yeah, so my personal answer is delegation, but strategically, the answer was, I mean, it was finding all the trends,
Mm-hmm.
clustering all the trends together, and then validating that all these folks were having similar work experiences, and just continuing to stratify and tease everything out until we had, we didn't have a set number. We could have had 30 personas possibly. We just happened to get about 10. So it was just teasing it out till we had everyone who worked similarly together, finding all the trends in behavior, travel, technology, like amount of time they're working, all those different dimensions.
Yeah.
And just kind of putting them together.
And then
just verifying that with ourselves and then with the stakeholders and the leaders.
Yeah. So now you have personas that have that are validated. How did you integrate that work into the project plan?
So yeah, it was pretty good. The hard part was over at that point, right? Like just getting them made was the hardest part, because after that, they became a way for us to talk about everything else. So we had all these new ways of working scenarios going inside too, and it became a way to say, hey, if you're a collaborative worker, here are a couple of ways of working that are going to apply to you in the future state that you can use. It's going to keep you as productive, and it's going to make life a little easier because you're not going to have to be, confined to one single desk. Here's ways now where you can live in the real world and do all the same stuff. If you're an administrative assistant, here's some new ways of working that are going to help you, because the way you work is different from a collaborative worker, from a finance guy, from an HR analyst, what have you. To accomplish these new ways of working, here's the learnings you would need in this persona to be able to be competent in all the technology that's going to allow you to have all these benefits to the new culture and technology that you have available to you.
Gotcha.
If you need even more support, here's a learning website we create internally. And if you don't want to look for specific tools to learn about, you can just click on your persona and it'll give you everything. Matter of fact, all the personas will be available. So if you're curious or there's something outside of how you work that you just want to learn about, you just click on another one. Nothing's locked from you.
So
It's
not
all
only did so in this particular project initiative, because not every organization is going to make this, you know, robust investment when it comes to personas, but
yep,
on your project experience, the personas were created. You use the information to drive messaging
yep,
from a communication standpoint, and there was also sounds like there was also like an online website.
yep.
What?
We tried to make support extremely available and redundant. You had help already packaged in the new tools. We created more visually appealing and even easier web pages for folks to access help. We continuously talked about the help, and we even used supplementary systems that we already have that are support tools that are kind of like application agnostic to help people who got a little confused about anything. We put it everywhere. Literally, it was all over the place.
Gotcha,
So,
gotcha. And we before the interview, you were talking about you know, I think you said something similar to, you know, once you create personas, it's a skill that you can apply in
yeah.
various areas of work.
I think I called it like the VLOOKUP of methodologies, right? Like, you know, we all did it. When you learned VLOOKUPs, you thought, this is a little bit of work, but this is really cool. And then you started finding every opportunity to use it. So now, you know, as in all things, when you're building out your plan, you got to figure out what's going to provide me some real benefit and what's just an activity. Because you always want to steer clear of just doing work for the sake of having activities.
Mm-hmm.
It's, you know, it's really impressive when you're talking to the steering committee, but when it comes down to it, what did you spend those hours working on? What came of it? What was the impact? So, you know, when I talk to colleagues who are curious about it, we always have to start the conversation with kind of learning what they're working on and what they're trying to accomplish, and then just trying to figure out, you know, I can share some of my persona work with you, and you know, for your development, for your benefit, just know about it. But is this even where you want to use it right now? Maybe, maybe not. In the case of a colleague I had a conversation with previously, just a week ago, we determined it really wasn't something he needed. It's something he could do. He could communicate through it, but
The investment
it
wouldn't be
wasn't
worth
really
it.
good. It wasn't going to be worth the time.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
this case.
No, I love that. That's something that we always talk about on the ChangeNerd webcast. You know, how can you prioritize? How can you add value? Because doing activity is great for billable hours, but it's not going to add any value to the client. So
Exactly.
you got to think about that. Yeah. So so what are some common mistakes? You know, you know, as you were on the project going through this journey, you know, were there did anything happen where you or the team was like, okay, we can't do that again? What are some
We
lessons?
got we got lucky. Nothing like that happened, but I could see where a lot of stuff could happen. Like early on, a thing people don't know about me, and a thing people don't like see coming from me, they get blindsided by it, is like I'm I'm not a meticulous guy, right? But like I am extremely like neurotically meticulous about survey design. So so a thing that could go wrong, and this is like a blanket thing that can happen anytime you want to like involve a questionnaire or survey, is like if your question, the structure of your questions, the structure of your survey isn't like spot on, it can contaminate the answers you get back, and that can really do harm to the product, right? You gotta ask the right questions. I mean, you're taking a lot of time. You're asking, in most cases, a lot of questions. You need to make sure you're asking exactly what you need to know, and not making like very common survey design errors that
Gotcha.
people make all the time. And then there's like follow-up stuff. So it's still connected to the surveys, still connected to like getting the data. It's, you know, you want to try to solicit way more folks than you expect to get back. So we, like I said, we solicited thousands, we got back hundreds.
Gotcha.
That percentage we got back was common for the company, but you wouldn't have been comfortable with it as like an external person, or like as a person that did like surveys professionally. It was pretty, it's kind of low by scientific standards.
Yeah.
I constantly had to be reminded by my team, like, this isn't scientific. And I'm like, It is kind of though, you know.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess in
Yeah.
the data gathering is an area where you want
Tricky
to,
part.
yeah, is a tricky part
Tricky.
because if you take the approach of, okay, we're going to get select individuals, get their perspective, right, plus some available data, then you just have to be mindful and make some strong assumptions that that product, that persona that you're building, that archetype may not be, may not be all inclusive of what that stakeholder is really going through.
Yeah, and you don't want to, you know, you definitely want to remember that every individual input is equal. So you don't want to start doing a thing that folks do where they weigh executive inputs heavier
Gotcha.
because they don't matter any more than the analyst
Gotcha.
that for this purpose, right?
Yeah.
So, but those are common things, like just how we interact with people and how we weigh information we get from certain people. You just want to steer clear of those like kind of normal human industry like
Yeah.
issues people have.
Yeah, yeah. Darren, thank you so much, man, for having this conversation. I want to be
Yeah,
mindful of your time. I love the pinpointed advice that you gave throughout this time. So thank you so much for doing the interview.
yeah. Thank you for having me.
All right, take care.